What's up, world? It's your boy Trey _GT back for another episode of the G.Taylor Show. Hope that your week has been amazing and everything is going well for you. And it's been good. This is CSWE week, so we will be in Kansas City this week discussing engaging black men in therapy and black men in social work, doing that workshop. And so I'm super excited to present on that platform on Friday, actually getting in there around Thursday. And so and hopefully meeting some of my colleagues and people I've networked with on social media. It was a great time last time in Atlanta. I met so many people off social media in person, so that was super dope. Things like that. So, but before we get into everything real quick, I want to make sure you like, share, subscribe to the G.Taylor Show. Please, if anything, if you don't even like the show, or don't even want to get no support, or don't think I'm talking about anything of relevance, please at least subscribe, and so you can tell me, so you can at least I can get those actual subscribers and things like that, and then share with somebody else that might be of benefit to them as well. But yeah, we're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any of your digital streaming platforms. We are on that as well. And we're looking at the time, trying to watch the time today. Because I do have a meeting coming up. Anyways, so yeah. So I thought, well, my guys, and then I also thought that it would be a great time to have a conversation about, oh my goodness, this thing is, I wonder what happened here. Don't know what happened there. Okay. Thought it'd be a great time to express why I got into the social work profession. I talked about it at NESW Pennsylvania chapters gala last weekend, and it was a great time. Shout out to them. Shout out to President McNeil for having me as a keynote for the gala awards, and shout out to all the award recipients at NESWPA last weekend. We had a good time. They sung happy birthday to my daughter and my wife. I met a bunch of amazing people again off social media. Kenneth Bournet, that's my finally met him in person, and so he's doing a lot of stuff for black youth, black boys, things like that. But so that was dope, right? And I talked about my purpose and journey through social work and how I got to this space. So right now, as it stands, I'm currently assistant professor in the MSW department at Virginia State University. So I do teach in a HBCU around social work. We have a new program. It's amazing. Great leadership there. And I'm looking forward to the next generation of social workers that we graduate. And so I do that. And then secondly, I do clinical supervision. So I have, 5 supervisees that I provide clinical supervision to in the state of Virginia. Then also outside of that, I do a lot of speaking and facilitation. Of course, I do keynote speakings now, add that to my resume, keynote speaker. But then also do a lot of speaking around social justice, racial equity, black men and mental health and faith, DEI based work. I do a lot of workshops facilitating around, DEI, black men, all those good things, right? And recently just added a workshop series called Non-Biased Documentation. And so that's all. So in a nutshell, those are my 3 pieces of myself. Now, of course, I'm a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a creative, I'm a 3-time published author, and all these other good things, right? And I'm a family man, right? And so I have a lot of different roles and hats that I wear. But how did I get to the space of social work, and how did I get to this point? And I'll be honest with you all, like I told the crowd last week, I didn't want any of this. I didn't even want to become a licensed clinical social worker, which is so much conversation around what LCSWs and exams that's happening right now. And so we will be talking about that in another episode. But be honest with you all, y'all, like, listen, I've navigated I think I've done a lot of different things in my social work career. You also have to think too, I've also done a lot social work and mental health. So I've been in the social work profession for about 9 years at this point, coming up on 10 years in the social work profession. So I'm a seasoned veteran at this point. I also been in the field of mental health for 12 years. So I started in mental health before I started in social work. So I have tons of experience, tons of case studies, situations that has come about. How have I survived and lasted this long? By the grace of God, of course, and a lot of community, a lot of prayer, support, family, friends, and diversifying myself. I got into the field of social work with the thought that I would still figure out how to do business and brand myself as a social worker, but just trying to figure out what that would entail, right? Because nobody was, you don't go to school, you get taught, what the business and branding side of social work looks like. I have a bachelor's in psychology from VCU, but I got first introduced to social work via VCU at a social work 101 class. It was there where I wanted to do policy-based work. And I missed the deadline for VCU, of course, even though VCU School of Social Work has sort of pseudo-adopted me at this point. I've worked with them in the past. I went to George Mason University to get my master's in social work, where I did focus and concentrate in policy and advocacy. And so that translated to me graduating, my first job out of postgraduate. Now, mind you, before that, I worked in inpatient. I worked psychiatric inpatient for 2.5 years before I got my master's in social work degree. So that was an element that I was already exposed to around clinical mental health, clinical social work. I knew social workers on the unit, things like that. And so just, asking them about their career, profession, things that they do, and just following their footsteps in a sense. And we're great colleagues today. And so, but when I jumped into my profession with my credentials as an MSW, I had no idea I would end up in where I'm at right now. I'll be honest with y'all. I did not. I know I wanted to do business. I know I wanted to do speaking, right? In some form or fashion. But I wanted to do policy-based work realistically. And that's what my goal was trying to get to. I'm trying to get to state and federal policy. I have yet to do any type of state and federal policy. So hopefully that comes around at some point as I'm working on my DSW, because I am in my doctoral program working on my DSW at University of Kentucky. Shout out to all my cohort and everybody that has graduated from UK as well. So I wasn't aware, but in my journey, in my trajectory with going into the space, where I was at in Virginia, took a job doing crisis-based work, assessing folks who are, suicidal, homicidal, not taking care of themselves, and did that for about 3.5 years and really understood the dynamics of how micro, meso, and macro work together, because we assess folks when we had a time frame to assess folks, and that was based off public policy from politicians due to a situational incident that has happened from one of our elected officials and his child due to mental health care system. And so I got to see that. I got to see the DSM-5 up close and personal. I also didn't see a lot of myself in the spaces, so I'm always typically in these spaces where I'm the only black male professional, or at least there's maybe a handful of us, right, that are there. And so that was new. But I started to look into, what does mental health look like for black people? And I had already started that while I was working inpatient. So a lot of stuff that you all see today, I had been building upon probably since 2012, 2011, because I just saw, different things. So even down to the work that I do around black mental health and black men, that had roots back in 2012. Some of my stuff called the Goodfellas Project, that had roots back in 2012, 2013, right? So some of the stuff that you all are seeing today have been, foundational roots from, almost 10 years ago. And so when I transitioned into doing crisis-based work after, getting my master's, then that pushed me into, I had to get my license, and I had to be license eligible unless I had to find a new job or, go to another department. Didn't want to get the license. Did not want to get the license, want to do policy-based work, but not realizing that throughout the majority of my career, I've affected policy or come in contact with some form of policy at the community level, at the state level, in some form of fashion. And then, and I didn't want to do a private practice. I did not want to do a private practice. None of the stuff that y'all have seen, most of it I didn't want to do. And so when we transitioned from getting our license and we started to get the license, we was like, you know what, might as well get the license, see where it takes us. And that's what I did. And ended up getting my license after the third try. It took me about 1.5 years to get my license after taking the first exam. When I got that, I started to play with the thought of private practice, right? And saw that was maybe an out from working with the same systems that I had grown burnt out, frustrated with. I did do a stint working in substance use for quite some time, doing care coordination. And that's where I really started to lay the foundation of, what that private practice looks like. But prior to that, I had created groups like the Goodfellas Project, which was really focused on working with black men in the community. I did a lot of business around creating T-shirts, mental health T-shirts. I started podcasting. And then I had already started doing some speaking in the community in certain areas around that. And that was around, anywhere between 2015, 2016, 2017. I had started out in some community groups, doing some community events. One was Stop the Violence. Then we turned into UIE, where we was trying to engage the community around teen violence. So some of the stuff that, like, again, that you said, like you see now, have been, have roots years prior. And so I have a lot of different goals and aspirations and visions sometimes. And sometimes I act on them all at once. And then sometimes I do them in stages. But for me, when I started to look at the landscape of social work, the landscape of what I could do, it was the reason why I chose social work. I chose social work to be somewhat, independent and free, to dibble and dabble and practice in multi versions or different areas of practice. So I could possibly do one-on-one therapy while also doing group therapy, support style group therapy in the community. I could speak on mental health and do trainings and mental health workshops in the community while also working my 9 to 5 and, and working in a, area that does maybe mostly clinical work. That's the reason why I chose social work. So I could not be bound just by a set of, rules and principles or set of guidelines that we would do as a clinician, but to be able to dibble and dabble and put my hands into different places and areas of social work practice. I, for one, know that me personally, y'all, I have to have options. That's the type of person I am. I like having options. I like having the opportunity to try something new, to challenge myself, and to also maneuver through the area. I don't think I could stay in one place or one role for 20, 30 plus years. That's just not how I'm wired. I like challenges. I like growth. I like to venture out and do things. And so I saw that as an opportunity to build off my social work degree and then hopefully build off my license. And so that's why I dipped into podcasting, content creation, did shirts. I did T-shirts multiple times. I wrote books. I did, this is my third book that I wrote, Refresh the Journey to Find Peace. I wrote books. I did the Goodfellas Project. I did, trying to figure out how we can blend, I did blogs. I wrote about, blending, like, learn about mental health, but also blending my favorite athlete's story with how we can overcome certain things. Talked about faith in mental health. Like, all these things, like, it gave me an opportunity to do that because it falls under different areas of social work practice. And so when I got to the space of my private practice, I created a private practice that was specifically for black men, which was unheard of at the time. And so we ended up doing that after I got my license finally, and did that for about 3.5 years. And we had black men, we had black women, and we also, I probably had like an 85% show rate. I tell people that all the time. And we did therapy in a way that meets black men where they're at. And I think that my guys did get better. I think they started to, heal, and they did heal some forms of passion of their life. And I feel like that they could have continued on if they wanted to, but I had also reached a point in my life where I had to, again, transition and pivot. My family had grown, things was going on. And so I wanted to make sure that I was practicing good sound self-care and not just talking to my clients about it. Right. And so that prompted me to shift into opportunity that came up for academia, which I wanted to work in academia, but wasn't aware of how to get, break through the mold to start it. And so I had an opportunity from a good friend, a colleague who was working and trying to, look into building her team down at Virginia State, and ended up becoming an assistant professor there. And I'm actually coming up on 2 years assistant professor in January. And then the opportunity, because I had to shift my private practice, was, okay, do you want to do clinical supervision? And so I ended up, doing clinical supervision for a colleague, and then also for the state that, gives supervision, provides free supervision to black and brown social workers who can't find supervisors in the state. And so I've been doing that for the last 2 years as well. And so these opportunities, and then, speaking engagements started to roll in. They started to, get faster. I also created the Brothers in Social Work Collective with my guys, Chris and Doc, Dr. James Bell, and Chris Scott, the hip hop social worker. And we did conversations about, social work in academia, supporting social workers in the academic space. We work with Wayne State University, University of Alabama. And we started this thing where, there was opportunities to say, okay, well, how can we best serve and support Black and brown social workers in the academic space? Because sometimes they feel like they don't belong, or they have to answer for Black issues. They want to learn. They want to know about opportunities. They want to grow. They want to know what that looks like. And they need to see it, right? I mean, I know for me going into this space and trying to become a licensed social worker and do private practice, there wasn't a lot of guys out there that was doing it. And so I had to seek them out, especially being in Virginia. And so, cats like Bashe Williams and Aaron Mueller, Rashawn Miller, people like that, were my kind of guiding paths and stuff. And so I've created my collective that's been successful as well. And again, social work affords me the opportunity to dibble and dabble in different spaces. And so at this point now, like, there has been challenges along the way. There has been issues along the way. There has been times I want to leave the field along the way. And it was, mostly around just, well, what do I do next? If I don't have the license, then what's next? Do I shift and pivot here? Is it worth it having the license and doing the private practice? What does business look like without the private practice? How do I pass this LCSW exam? All these good things. And so I think for me, I have a lot of good support system in place to help me, make the decisions that I need to make. And then I also have folks who push me, right, to think beyond just, myself and my individual goals, but then also your purpose. Think beyond, like, okay, what are you here to do? What are you here to open the doors for? What are you here to show folks? And so I've had a renewed sense of, purpose since taking the job at Virginia State, renewed sense of purpose doing clinical supervision. And just, moving into my 10th year of social work is just like, okay, well, my purpose now is to reach back and to teach the next generation of social workers. My purpose now is to also leave some breadcrumbs, leave a blueprint for the next generation of social workers so that they can build upon that. Whatever goals that I hit, I'm going to hit as far as personal goals, but then hopefully it will also leave some foundation for folks to build off of, take, learn from, grow from, do something new or alternative, and build that in the future. And that's where I'm at in the middle of my career. I would think going into my 10th year is just, taking all those experiences, taking all those things that made me who I am, because I always took that. I always took what made me who I am as a person and infused it with the field, right? I could separate them. I know how to separate personal and professional, but I took the things that made me who I am as a person into the field, into the profession, so that others could see the same thing. So I don't, I got my locks, I cut my hair, I got my hoodies, I come in with my Jordans, my J's, right? That's how I show up as an authentic self, but then also as an authentic Black social worker, so that, hey, when I'm working with my clients, they can feel comfortable, they can see me, they understand, what's going on. And then also for future social workers, future generation social workers, they can also see what a social worker can show up as, and they don't have to exclude their authentic self. But as a result of that, right, that was from day one. That was day one, and that still continued to in this day of how I carry myself in this profession. So those things, pop up, they happen. And now I'm in the space of just making sure that I give back to the next generation of social workers. And then also, social workers who are who may be in the space where they feel like they can't be the authentic selves. They don't know what's next in their career, but they can see, oh, this is an opportunity where I could pivot and do this, or I could pivot and do that. I am of the firm belief that I think that social workers need to understand how much of a business and a brand that they are, and how valuable they are in the profession. And so you can do more than just clinical based work, case management, things like that, or therapy. You can do speaking engagements. You can hold workshops. You can do, speaking and workshops around continuing education credits, because we all need that each and every year, right? You can do adjunct teaching. You can teach it full time if you wanted to. That doesn't have to be a premier university. That could be at a community college or things like that, or online university. as well. You know, you can do other things to diversify your work as a social worker, or a licensed clinical social worker, whatever you are, so that you can sustain long term in the profession, right? And so I tell, clinicians this, right? Like, if you can do a 60-minute therapy session, you can probably do a 1 to 2 hour workshop on just that therapy session, just how you introduce a work with a certain problem, whether it's anger, sadness, depression, whatever. What intervention you use, how did you use that intervention, right? The client dynamic relationships, social justice, cultural competency, cultural humility in practice. These things that are standard practices that sometimes we think are boring or nobody wants to hear about are things that, group practices, agencies, clinicians all over need refreshers on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Everything is not, I think sometimes we think that because we got the license, because we got all these accolades, we have it all together, we remember all this information, and we don't. It's impossible to remember all this information. So I tell social workers, hey, listen, or, clinicians who are looking to kind of pivot, do something different. Hey, listen, man, just look at what you can do well. What's your favorite topics that you like talking about, favorite, areas, population or whatever. And then, write out 3 of those workshops, put some objectives to it, and then build it out from there. And then market yourself. And a lot of people don't know how to market yourself. It's like, okay, well, as much as you post on social media, or if you just cold calling or cold talking to folks, you networking and say, hey, this is what I do, let them know, let people know what you do. People don't know what you do if you don't tell them. People don't know what you do if you just keep it to yourself. Let people know what you do, and people will find you. People find me all the time. I have not no constant communication, no connection with them at all, and somehow I get found in little old Virginia here, right? And so you just have to let people know what you do, and again, embrace social work in the way that you embraced it when you first started, when you first said, I wanted to pursue this profession. Embrace it that way, even in your, early, later in your career. You have to embrace it that same way, so that you can, reinvent yourself. You can adjust, because again, right, you might have had passion for this area, population, or group, or just the type of the clinical based work at one point in your career, or you have passion group, interest in this part of social work and, in the macro space in one part of your career, but it changes. Seasons change. Stuff changes. We got to shift a little bit. And so that's okay to do in practice. And that's the beauty of social work, is that you can shift from being a clinician to a therapist, to doing policy, to teaching, to supervision, to speaking, to workshops, to program management. That's the beauty in the profession. That's what keeps us going and sustainable and not burning ourselves out. So that's just a little bit about me. I hope that has answered and cleared up some questions. Of course, I went through that pretty fast. But if you got questions, drop them in the comments. Let me know. And then I'll make one-offs probably to address some of the questions that people have, or some of the different themes throughout this different video. But hopefully that you have a good week. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, the G.Taylor Show, share with somebody, and then we're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any type of digital streaming platforms. You can listen to the audio versions as well there. All right. Take care, y'all. Have a great week. Talk soon.